Hello, and welcome to our Building Business podcast. I'm here today with Ms. Shawntay Dixon. She is the program manager at the Great Lakes Women's Business Council here in the region, a very valuable asset to the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And we're just going to ask her a couple of questions in regards to passion, purpose, and profit for entrepreneurs. Good morning, Shawntay. How are you today?
I am doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm great. We're so excited to have you with us today, just to ask some simple questions, give some key pointers for entrepreneurs and as they are seeking their path to growth. We know you just had an exciting conference, Recreating the Path to Profit. And I guess profits are important, of course. But how important is it for a small business to operate from their core mission purpose?
Wow, that's a loaded question and a very good question. I'm all about purpose, and it's so easy for individuals to, I guess, get easily distracted. Sometimes shiny opportunities is a distraction. So it's really important for you to have a sense of what you are as a business, what your core values are. And again, we talked about purpose, because when those opportunities come, I call them distractions, that can lead you off that path that you have. And that's never a good thing. So you always want to make sure that you know, again, your mission, your purpose for your business being, because that will help guide you to stay focused as you go along this journey of business development. And again, every opportunity is not a good opportunity. And sometimes we can lose focus because we're not sure of our purpose, or because we get off that beaten path. And we want to make sure that we stay focused, and your purpose helps to do that. Because I believe your purpose, it definitely guides everything that you do in your business, and it aligns hopefully with you as that business leader as well. So when you get off of that, I believe it just leads you down a dangerous path.
Yes, I agree. And many people, we talk about branding and brand marketing, and I always hear the phrase, yes, that's on brand, so making sure that you stay true to your core values and purpose are important. So, and with that, it can be very exhausting being a small business. Many are solopreneurs. Maybe they have some contractors. So in your experience, how have you seen, or how have entrepreneurs maintained their passion? Because you really have to have a heart for doing this. No risk, no reward. You have to, I can think cliche, but you really have to put the work in. So how have you seen successful entrepreneurs maintain their passion?
Well, to maintain your passion, again, you have to discover, your why. Why are you doing this? I think that's essential, which ties back to your purpose as well. I believe you have to think big picture as well. I know that it can be quite lonely, on this path sometimes as an entrepreneur, and a lot of hard work. And sometimes you just don't see, the days seem to blur together. But if you think in big picture and you have that vision that you're working and striving toward, that's how that passion just continues to ignite. And it just fuels to continue to, walk in that. And again, passion is important, but I believe that purpose is what's going to really push you through, and that why is going to keep you moving forward, because sometimes you just don't feel like it. That passion is just not there, but you got to do it. And I think that's the power of purpose. That purpose is going to help drive you when you just don't feel that passion, or you just don't feel like continuing to do it after you've received so many no's and you've had so many failures in your mind. That purpose is what's going to drive you to get back up, because that big picture, that vision that you're striving toward, is going to help fuel you. And that a lot of times that reignite that passion when you just don't have it. I hope that answered your question. It's a loaded question. So many directions I'm going to go into, but
yeah. That's perfect, because there are times when you don't feel like doing anything. And sometimes you just need to revitalize yourself so you can keep moving forward. You don't want to burn out. You want to have passion, but on the same end, you don't want to burn out as well.
Can I add to that? It just came
Sure.
to me, the power of relationships as well, because as I mentioned, being a solopreneur in particular, it's a lonely road and you are wearing all the hats and you're carrying the whole load. So building relationships and having that network to support you, hopefully is like-minded individuals, because they get the ebbs and flow of what you're into, so they can help encourage you along the way. But also building those relationships, because you can't do everything yourself. And when you have those relationships built, it just helps to bring access to those resources that you may not have known existed, and also the help that you need to get through different phases of that business life cycle. So I want to add to, in addition to having that purpose and, thinking big picture and having a vision, you can't do it alone. Even though you are alone, you need to have those relationships established, that support of like-minded individuals that are helping to encourage you along the way, and also giving you that push that you need and support that you need.
Yes, that's pivotal. Having a good tribe, professionally and personally, those are very important, very important. Thank you for adding that. So also, you've been in this game for quite a while. What are some of the mistakes that you've seen entrepreneurs make as they start out? And the second part is, how can they overcome some of those mistakes?
Well, I know, there are some pros and cons about business planning, but a lot of mistakes that I see individuals make is when they don't have a plan. And when I say plan, I'm not thinking of so formal where it's, 40-page business plan, but you got to have a plan for where you want to go, the goals you want to achieve, how you're going to achieve it, what are the resources. And a lot of times, entrepreneurs, we're creative, we're wired differently. So a lot of times we get inspired by something, we want to move fast. And I believe that a lot of mistakes happen because you didn't have a plan in place. And I think of a plan, the importance of a plan is like when you're traveling and you have a map. We used to use maps when I was growing up, but now we use our handy dandy OnStar or some GPS component, but it helps because it lets you know your destination and where you are and how you're going to get there. And that is so important, because if something happens, I remember I was traveling this past summer and there was an accident that we didn't know was further down the road, and it deviated us off, kept saying, you can get there quicker. And I'm like, I don't want to go quicker. I want to go the way I always go, out 75 South, right? And something just said, follow the GPS, because there must be a reason they're asking. And of course, it diverted us around this challenge that would have probably taken us way more hours off our path, of course. And we would have ended up spending more resources, because we probably would have had to stay somewhere or get off to eat, or, or been fatigued. So I look at the plan similar to that GPS. You know where you're going, the goals you have, but this is where I am now. And the plan will help you to assess, what do you need to get there and how can you get there? And a lot of times entrepreneurs, we jump out in our enthusiasm and we don't have a plan, and you don't realize what you don't know, like you said, until you get to that point. And it's like, wow, if you would have had thought through with a formal planning, at least of some sort, you could have at least considered some of those aspects. You can't plan for everything, of course, but that plan will just help, so that if something comes that cause you to have to pivot or deviate, you have a starting point and an ending point from where to go. And a lot of entrepreneurs, because they don't have a plan, you burn a lot of resources, and we have limited resources already as a small business. We don't have unlimited resources. So when you jump out there and you didn't have a plan and you're encountering a lot of mistakes that you didn't anticipate, that can burn up the resources that you have very fast, and your energy. It can be very discouraging. And, there's a balancing act, because you can, I have, I have a natural propensity to plan and contemplate. Sometimes you can over plan where you feel like you don't know enough. and you're afraid to move and you miss out on opportunity. So there's a delicate dance, I call it, between how much should you plan, and there's a balance between that. But I believe you should have a plan of some sort before you venture out, and hopefully you have some professionals or those who know what should go into that planning, those planning stages, so you can consider those elements that you don't or would not consider. Because a lot of times entrepreneurs, we go into business based on a passion that we have, or a talent that we have, or skills. So we're good at making cakes, so to speak, but we didn't consider all of the aspects of, if I'm going to do this as a business, I got to think of all the costs that's involved, every material that's being used, and so forth. So that planning, I think, is really, to me, I'm a proponent of planning, having a plan.
Yes, that's excellent. And I know you mentioned about what they call it, analysis paralysis. You really do need to balance the act. But what have you observed in terms of a successful entrepreneur or a successful small business? What are some of the major components or areas that they need to have in place? Because you just mentioned there are other things that you have to consider. And so what are some of those other things that they need to consider outside of just their expertise and their skill set? What's the overall system that they need to have in order to position themselves to be profitable?
Well, I think that a lot of work needs to go into understanding your market and who is your customer. Again, a lot of entrepreneurs are passionate about what we do, and because mama and them, think it's a good thing, and we sell out to all our cousins and those in our immediate circle. But is there really a market to support your idea that's going to give you those sales that you're going to need to survive? Because mama and them get tired of buying from you after a point. And I'm speaking from own personal experience, even having an MBA and management and so forth. I leaped out there one time, and I started a intimate apparel business. I call it selling bras and draws. And again, people that I was working with, and in the facility that we were working in, and family, they were like, oh, this is just great. And I really didn't consider all the aspects of that market. And again, I sold out to family and friends, but I still have inventory in the attic. Matter of fact, during the pandemic, I just donated to a lot of homeless shelters, because it's like, what am I gonna do all these bras and draws, again, not considering all the aspects of, do I really have a market to support this, and understanding your market, the competition. So what I had encountered was that, a lot of the box stores was able to get the product that I was getting, and I can only order maybe 20 items when they have a whole pallet. So of course my costs, what I charged the customer was much higher. And I believe a few people was like, well, I can get this from, I can't remember what store, let's just say Walmart. I can get this from Walmart for 10. Why are you charging me 30 for it? And I'm like, wow, so just those type of things. So understanding your market in terms of, your customers. Is there really a market out there to support what you're doing? Are they willing to pay the price that you're charging? Do you know and have done a deep dive into your competition? Because you're not the only, you're not the best thing that's out there, but how do you differentiate yourself from what's out there, know what they're doing well, and what are some areas for opportunity for you to jump in? So definitely market is big. And another aspect is the financials. That's the area that most of us shy away from. It's not the most sexiest topic, and it's not, fun, but it's so important, just knowing the financial end of your business, as far as, like I said, the costs that are involved. And a lot of times our small businesses feel, well, I'm making a lot of sales, I'm living large, I'm blowing up, but they're not profitable because they didn't consider the cost that, and expenses that goes along with it. And you wonder, like, wow, how could that business be closing? And they're getting, we see lines of folks out there and, supporting them. But again, they didn't cover all of the costs. So definitely financials and marketing would be the biggest areas that I see our small businesses suffer and struggle with.
Yes, and that's important. And thank you for pointing that out in terms of the financials. That's an area that a lot of small businesses struggle in. And it's been said that accounting is the language of business. So how can small businesses or entrepreneurs, how can they overcome that hurdle? What are some resources to kind of help them navigate understanding their numbers and then being on top of them on a regular basis, keeping up with bookkeeping, putting in a system for so that they know their sales compared to their expenses?
Right. Well, I don't believe that everybody is equipped to, be a CPA, so to speak, but I believe you should still be knowledgeable, have a certain level of knowledge so that you can understand. Because I've seen so many examples of small businesses in particular, the business owner was not knowledgeable and they entrusted their whole financial management to, another party. And you hear so many stories of how that did not go well for them. So I understand that, we have to do what we're good at, and that's why relationships are important, but get connected to those organizations that provide that support. But I would also say, again, take some training, some basic courses, just so you can understand, the difference between an asset and an expense from your revenue and what goes into establishing your pricing and so forth. And again, get connected with those organizations such as the SBDC that does it well, Prosper Us, Tech Town, because again, I had mentioned this in the Black History Month program. We do webinars on financials, and those are the least attended. I would think people would be busting down the doors about that because, money makes the world goes round. But it's a topic that it causes a lot of uncomfortability because people just don't feel comfortable and knowledgeable, but you got to educate yourself enough to understand it so that when you entrust it to a bookkeeper or an accountant that's going to do it, you can at least be able to understand to a certain degree and can ask questions. I would say that's why it's important to build your network. Get an accountant that can work along with you. And there are so many great professionals out here in the Metro Detroit area that support small businesses that are not going to charge you an arm and a leg. I think of Bonita Tyler as one that, and so many others that will really work with you to help you not just do the reports for you or your financials, but help educate you. You want to make sure that they're providing that counseling that goes along with it, because it can be intimidating. And that's why it's really important when you are small to develop that team. And I always say an accountant is a very important team member to have. And there are organizations around, I want to say Accounting Aid Society, I know helps with taxes, but just do your research. And if you connect with organizations that are in the community and doing business development, they have a professional service network that they can connect you to as well. Because I don't expect, if you're not good at math and numbers, that you'll all of a sudden become an expert in finances, but you need to educate yourself to the degree where you can at least understand. I hope that answered your question. I kind of went all around, but.
Oh, no, that was perfect. And the resources are out there. There are just so many resources for entrepreneurs at this time. I've never seen so much information before. Like you, I had a transition where I wasn't working for anyone and I had a small consulting business. And the challenge for me, it was the financials, and I was able to connect with Miss Bonita Tyler, and I learned a lot from her, and it helped me to stay organized. So throughout the year, instead of giving her a shoebox, I started off like that. I go,
but at least you kept them though. That's a good thing.
Yes, but by the end, I'll never forget the look on her face. We met, and I came, and I had an envelope like this thick. It was thin because everything was nice and organized. And she was like, oh, I was like looking like a good student. Oh yeah, here it is. So it makes her job easier as well. So really having a mindset to think about your numbers throughout the year.
Yeah.
And that's key. And this may be the same question, but in terms of cash flow, because we talked about profit, we talked about expenses, but cash flow is king. And that's what keeps you in business.
Mm-hmm.
That's what helps you when you have the people around the corner. If your cash flow is right, then you can get another location around and have the same thing around the corner. So in terms of cash flow, that is a major challenge.
Yeah. Ooh.
What are some strategies if we can make it to break even? How can we get cash flow in order so that we can cover those expenses and stay in business another day?
And that's why it's important to have that planning because, prior to going to Great Lakes, I co-owned a clinic and this is one example about you can be generating a lot of revenue and still hurting. And, I bring up the clinic because a lot of our revenue came from billables, clients coming to be seen, they didn't pay cash. We had to build insurance companies. So if you have an understanding that, the nature of your business and where your cash is coming from, because building insurance companies, someone can come in to the office we seen today, March 18th, and we won't see that payment until on a good claim, maybe April 18th. So that's a whole nother 30 days. And I know some of our entrepreneurs, they're doing business where they're billing, a client, and especially if you do government work, we already know sometimes it can be 90 days before that payment come in. So really understanding the nature of your business, and you may have to diversify the type of clients. So you may not be able to have all types of clients that are being billed. You have to have a variety of it so that there is money flowing through the organization, because if there's not money flowing through the company, that means you as the owner is probably going to have to infuse some capital into that company. And you're going into business so that your business can survive, but also you don't want to be losing your shirt where you're always pouring money into the company. So you got to look at even that, the type of business that you have and the nature of where your cash is coming from, and really have a strategy around it. Now, again, if you're doing government work, they're going to pay you. That's one thing, they guarantee they're going to pay you. But a small business, 90 days to 6 months to receive payment can cause lights being turned off, your phone is off. So again, you can't run a business if you don't have what you need to maintain your operations, or if you can't pay your employees. Now, I was very loyal back in my youth. And I remember there's a time I worked for a small business and I didn't have a family at that point. So they were saying, well, we can't pay you this week, but can we pay you next week? And I'm like, oh, okay. But most people are not going to do that, just wait forever and ever. And so then if you lose your employees, that's your lifeline, being able to provide the service. So you just really want to know the nature of where your cash is coming from, because you raised a good point. Cash is the life flow of your business. That's like the blood that runs through our veins as a human. So understanding the nature of your business, and that's why it's important to have an accountant who can counsel and educate you and can look at, if you're running a business where you're relying on a lot of billables and so forth, maybe diversifying to get some cash, or if you have to infuse cash, maybe looking at different access to capital and what's going to work for you, working capital that's going to tie you over because you know that this client is going to pay. So just that education and knowing the nature of where your money's coming from, when it's coming, because again, when I took over the clinic and became active in it, on the books, it looked like, wow, y'all just booming, y'all in the 6 figures. But it was like, man, why is our bank account, NSF and all that? So when you start looking, it's like, well, on the books, it's showing that we made the sale, but it's not coming until like 90 days or, so just understanding that so you can plan as a business owner how to navigate that so you can be sustainable and grow eventually.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And, revenue is one thing, but profitability is a total different thing. So that's, thank you for pointing that out. And the key thing I'm hearing is diversity. diversify. Don't have too many customers, or don't have too many customers paying you in billables and not enough where you can get some other revenue in that will give you cash on hand. So that's key, is diversifying your customer base and the way that you're paid. So I just want to ask one last question. We've covered so much, and I really appreciate all your insight. And it's very valuable that when you are servicing entrepreneurs, that you've been an entrepreneur yourself and you understand the challenges and the journey that your clients are up against. So with that being said, what are some of the key things that you feel are best practices that you've seen successful entrepreneurs do in their business?
Okay, let me think of a recent, let's say with the pandemic, we just launched a recovery program in 2020 for those who were detrimentally impacted by COVID. And we saw what individuals can do during a crisis. It usually brings up your A game, and as far as innovation, I've seen some tremendous things that people have done. I would say, you said best practices of what people have done. Definitely understanding the power of our social networks. A lot of our companies, and I use this as an example during the panel as well, is when the pandemic struck, a lot of our businesses were relying on, face-to-face interaction. One lady was in retail. She had just gotten on the shelves, and anyone who knows about getting to some of these large box stores, you can get on the shelf, but your struggle then begins, how do I maintain and stay on the shelves? Because if you're not making sales, they're gonna remove you. So that can be another challenge. So at the start of the pandemic, she had just gotten onto the Walmart shelves, and she was relying on, going into the stores, doing pop-ups, doing demonstrations. All that came to a halt once the pandemic struck. So again, we talk about the power of social networks. She worked with some of her co-mentors who were in the mentor cohort with her, and they came up with a campaign to build her social media awareness and her brand awareness and so forth. And so people, just because of the posts that she was doing and so forth, that drove them to get to stores and make sure I buy her product and buy it online and so forth. So the power of social networks, that's one example. There was another lady who was in retail, brick and mortar was totally shut down because it wasn't an essential business. And she took her store pretty much on the virtual road. She started doing Facebook Lives and doing shows, demonstrating her products and so forth. And it was, she added humor and all those things. Her personality is real bubbly and just real genuine. And again, she drove her brand awareness. More people bought her product during the pandemic because of that online presence and just being there than who would have visited her store. So it was very effective as far as being able to use social media. I know the social media get, a lot of negativity, but it can be a positive. And those are two examples of how it worked in favor of a small business owner, especially during a time when we could not gather and do these in-person events. Another, I want to say a best practice that was used is really knowing your company, and I wouldn't say it's a best practice. This is a best practice across the board, knowing your company, because we can't be everything to everybody. So really knowing who you are as a company, what are your core competencies? How are you different? What is your differentiator? What are some accomplishments that you've made? Being able to understand and articulate that, I think, is really a best practice. Because as an entrepreneur, you're a walking billboard. You meet potential customers are all around. And I learned this early in my career is that, my friends always say, well, why you always be in heels, or even with blue jeans, I'm wearing heels, just, I figured because I was short. But anyways, but again, you're a walking billboard and you never know who you're going to encounter, even at the grocery store or hair salon, that could be a potential customer. So I always since I was, a business professional and consulting, I always wanted to represent business. So I would tell people you're a walking billboard as an entrepreneur. You never know who you're going to encounter that can be your potential client or connect you to that potential client. So knowing your company, knowing who you are, your core competencies, and being able to pitch and articulate that, within 30 seconds to a minute. Those are some best practices that I've seen. Companies that are doing well can articulate that. Another one is, again, I have to go back to about the power of relationships. You cannot do business alone. And those who know how to build relationships and not look at it as what's in it for me, but what value do I bring to you? Not looking at myself, but looking at, what can I do to aid you in understanding that. And relationships take time. And again, it's not going to be, I meet you today and you're going to do business with me, but be invested for the long haul and building that relationship. And again, not look at what's in it for me, but how can I bring value to you? And those companies that are doing well have mastered that. I noticed as an entrepreneur, they mastered that, building those relationships. And during the pandemic, we have the power of relationships. Those companies that I've seen that we've worked with that have done well, it came because someone that they knew, a relationship that they had, connected them to an opportunity. So those are some best practices, knowing your company and being able to articulate that in a pitch, not necessarily a formal pitch, but being able to articulate that to others, understanding the power of your network and being able to master that and building relationships, and also the power of the social networks. I think those are best practices among so many, but those are the ones that really come up to me that I think is going to help sustain you if we encounter a crisis or if that's part of the norm now. Those are some best practices that I've noticed that worked.
Awesome. Thank you so much. There were so many gems in what you said. And I do appreciate your insight and your expertise in this area of building small businesses, and much more success to you and in the organization. And they can find more information about your organization. Where can you give us the website?
Okay, yes. Our main website is greatlakeswbc.org. And that's our Great Lakes Women's Business Council's website, greatlakeswbc.org. But in the Women's Business Center, we also have an online portal called the Michigan Women's Marketplace. And that's where they can access tools, business resources. We have live and on-demand webinars on various different business topics. Some of the topics that I talked about today, as far as building relationships and networking and marketing and all those things. So that's My Women, M-I as in Michigan, miwomen.com.
Thank you again. And
you're welcome.
Pushing through your fatigue.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Angeline, for having me. It's always a pleasure.
You're welcome.